Hi, hello. My name's Asusa Giri for Mol3D, and welcome to Sequencer. So today we're going to be going over Sequencer and how we used it to create shots within Slay. And so we're going to go over your normal sequencer, we're going to go over your master sequencer. We're also going to go in and show how you can modify assets using sequencer, keyframing, and being able to see all that in real time, and also any other little nice tidbits that I can add in within the amount of time allotted for the class. And so currently I have the project open, and it defaults open to the main temple level. And so what we're going to do is, inside of our content folder, we're going to go to sequences, we're going to go to TF, we're going to open that up, and then we're going to double click on TF edit, which right now it's a lot of stuff that's inside of here. And I'll go over later on, once we get a little bit more familiar with sequencer, what this all is and how we're actually going to recreate some of this to a certain degree. And so in order to do that first, we'll exit out of sequencer. So generally when you first double click on the TF edit and opens up sequencer, oftentimes this will open up as a separate window. And when that happens here, I'll just try to snap it out. There we go. It tends to just show up as a separate window. And what you can do is you can then just click and drag on the tab here and dock it somewhere that you feel comfortable with. I'll merge it down over here with my content browsers and my levels and just have those nice and snug together. But because of what we're going to be doing today, just for our intro beginnings, we're going to exit out of this sequencer. We're going to go to our content browser, and inside of our env folder, which holds all of our environments, in this case, the master level for the temple and all of the sub levels. But for what we want to do and for our purposes, we're going to want to make our own test level. And so in order to do that, just to keep things nice and tidy as well for the project, in case for any production you want to, or any project you want to move forward with the test and actually have it be a nice little R&D area, we're going to right click an empty space of this area in here, inside of here. We're going to right click, new folder. We're going to call this test level, test underscore level. We're going to double click inside of there, and then we're going to right click in the empty space one more time, and then we're going to right click and then go up until we see levels, level, left click on it, call this test level as well, and then we're going to double click it open. And if anything asks you to save, we didn't really do anything that would require for us to save, so we're just going to not save and then move on to this test level that has now been opened, which is just going to be a blank, I say blank, but it's really just dark level that has nothing inside of it.
And so now that we're in our test level, it's completely blank without anything else inside of here. And so just to start filling in our scene a little bit, what we're going to do is we're going to go to our basics. Then from there, we're going to go down to our plane, and we're going to click and drag the plane and just throw it anywhere into the scene. So that's not going to matter too much, as once we throw it into the scene, it'll be highlighted and selected. We'll then go to its location in the details panel, zero out its location, as for good measures and good habits, it's always good whenever you start your scenes to just always place your things in the center of the origin. And then from there, what we're gonna do is we're going to modify the scale, as right now it is 1 by 1 across all fronts, and really we want it to be a nice little walking floor. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna set the scale, and we're gonna set the scale a little bit ridiculously, 100 by 100 in these fronts here. And since there is no depth, we don't want any depth with the plane, we're just going to leave the last part as 1. And so the other thing is, now with that, it's still a dark scene, so we're just going to go to our lights, click on it in our place actors, and then also click and drag our directional light from that scene and just throw it into level as well. So now we don't really need a location for this directional light, as it's just the angle that's really more important. We're just gonna leave the light alone and just have it be the default direction it's pointing in. The only thing we're really going to modify from this light is going to be the intensity of it. We're going to set this down to a 1.5. And so now I'm just going to hit Control S and save for this level, or you can just right click on the level here and just hit save. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to go into our sequences, left click on it inside of our content, Slay sequences, and then from here we're going to create a new folder, and we're just going to call this test_sequences. Double click into there, as what we want to do is we want to at least have a folder location preset before we go in and create our sequence. And so let me go in and show you the sequencers that we're going to be dealing with. So you're going to go all the way to the top, click on cinematics, and from there there's going to be two different types. One is a level sequence and one is a master sequence. So the one that you're going to be commonly using and will be effectively your bread and butter from here on out, if you're going to start using sequencers more, will be your level sequence, as that's where you're going to be throwing in all your assets, all of your keyframing of your lights, spawning in stuff, spawning out stuff. A lot of the shenanigans of what you're going to be dealing with is going to be all inside of your level sequence. And as your master sequence, which we'll get into that for sure, but this is what's going to hold all of these other sequences inside of it, and I'll go into depth a little bit later for that. But just so we can get a good grip of our level sequence, we're going to add level sequence, go into our Slay, and then from there also go into our sequences, go into the new folder that we created called test level sequences that we just made, and inside of here I'm just going to give it a name, and I'll just call it as well test sequence 0010. And so with whenever you're making these sequences, just for your purposes, if you're doing these in shots or you're doing these in however you have it, just always have a method to the madness, as I like to say. Because if you check inside of our TF edit over here, this is how we created our shots, where we have our name of the shot TF and then the vert and then what shot we're in. So we're either in 10, 20, 30, 40, so on and so forth, and just goes down the line. So I would recommend, when you're doing your own, to have a method to your own madness, as we're only going to be dealing with one shot in this with what we're doing. We don't need to get too fancy with it, but always just have a naming convention locked and loaded that is understandable and that everyone has mostly agreed on, as this can save you time and can save you headaches down the road in terms of like, oh, which shot was which, or where do we have Oni doing that kickflip. The naming conventions always help. So we're going to save that, and it's going to automatically create this, and then we're going to be popped into the sequencer, and it'll bring out its own little tab. And let's get into it a little bit in terms of what we're going to be most commonly using when we're inside of sequencer. Obviously your save button in the upper left hand corner of it, your camera, your create new camera, which this one is oftentimes, more than not, you will be using this just to create a brand new camera, which then also creates a new camera cut. This is where you can add your new cameras, or you can also go into your cinematics in your place actors, and then you will have a cinematic camera actor, and then you can also click and drag that camera and throw it into sequencer as well. But back to what's inside of here. And so to the right of your camera creation button is effectively your render button. And once you have your shot that is ready and that you feel like is good to go, and you want to see it outside of UE and have it be a full little movie, this is the button that you're going to be hitting, and that you're going to be exporting what you have visually in UE out into the world. And so this is the options for your rendering as well. And then also from here, we're just going to skip and jump to your frames per second, whereas currently we have it at 30 frames per second. But for film and for the short that we did, we put it down to 24 FPS. But this is where you can set your frame rate for your sequencer, and it'll also update accordingly. But you can also choose whichever FPS fits your current needs. You also have your customs as well, where if you can absolutely create a custom one and it'll set it for you. You can also, if you do not like dealing with frames and you want to know how many minutes or how many seconds have actually gone by, you can go in here, show time as, and go into your seconds, frames, and DF time code, all that good stuff. And so also from there, you will also have your disabling of snapping. So whenever we set keyframes down, this is turned on by default, which is extremely useful, as it will oftentimes very much snap to a keyframe that you are going for. And so instead of you having to click on said keyframe and potentially missing that, you can just snap your scrubber to whatever keyframe is next to it. And then down here at the bottom, you have the center part is record. It's effectively how you record with inside of your sequencer, but we're not going to get into that as it's not something that we did, nor are we going to be doing. To the right of that is your play button, which once you hit play, just kicks it off and lets your scrubber go and shows how your sequencer is going to be playing in real time. So to the right of our play button, we have to next, which is to the next frame. As you can see in the scrubber, as it goes sequentially to the next number. So we're in frame 5 or frame 45 to next frame 46. So this is a good way just to manually go in and see per frame how things are moving across. And then jump to next key is if you have a keyframe that is locked and you want to, then let's just say it's like 10 frames away, instead of having to hit next 10 times, you can just hit this jump to next key and it'll snap to the next keyframe. It'll move your scrubber to the next keyframe that is there. And then this just snaps us straight to the end. And these are going to be the main keys of which we're going to be dealing with. And then on the opposite side is literally the exact same, just in reverse. It's just the exact opposite of everything that I went over in terms of moving, hitting play. It's just hitting reverse, going backwards, all that good stuff. And so now that we've gone over what the general buttons we're going to be using inside of Sequencer, we're going to go to our content browser and we're going to go to our Slay, Assets, Characters, and we're going to go into Oni, then we're going to grab his BP and throw his BP inside of the test level, just so we can have something in level that we can modify and that we can start using. And so now that he's in our level, he's not a part of our sequencer as we haven't attached him in any way, shape, or form. And same thing with any of our lights, any of our planes, they're not fully inside of our sequencer even though they're inside of our level. And so what we're going to do with our Oni is we're going to do one of two methods. One is in the world outliner, select and then click and drag and add him into your sequencer, into the empty little area that you have. That is one way. Another way, since he's in level, another way is by clicking track and then actor to sequencer. And then since we already have him in our sequencer, he's not going to show up again. But this is another method in which we can do it. And there is also a third method, which I'll go over in a second, as we just introduced him into our sequencer. And so now we should also add some stuff to him, because right now he is static and isn't really doing anything. And if you have opened up this project before and you've gone through it, you do know he has animations, or you should know he has animations. And even if you don't, because he is a skeletal mesh that is rigged and ready to go, Unreal by default shows that there is an animation track, gives you an animation track here so you don't have to add it in. So one easy method of which we can add our animations that are already in our project is by clicking on the animation and then clicking all the way on the right side the plus sign for the animation, and then selecting one of his animations effectively from any of the shots. And we'll go with, let's see how shot 80 looks in this sequence. So one thing you have to know is once we select our animation or you keyframe anything inside of Sequencer, it's all highly dependent on where your scrubber is. So always keep track of where this scrubber is located, as oftentimes when you slap a keyframe down, you might either overwrite another previous keyframe that you may not have wanted to, or the scrubber wasn't far enough to where it needed to be for you to have a keyframe. And so right now we'll scrub on the animation to see where our Oni is. In the world outliner, we'll select him and then press F. And then we'll see that he's up here. And so, oh, okay, we got a fun one. We got one where he's jumping down. So this one's the one where he's in the temple and then he leaps off and then slams down to the bottom of the floor. And so now that we have him in here, one thing that you have to keep in mind is these animations. So these animations were once mocap files that was recorded on a stage with a separate software. It was then passed into Maya, and then from there it was then converted into an FBX format that we then imported into our project. We won't go over the steps here, but essentially this is your end result. And also there's more than one way to add an animation into your sequencer. What I'm going to do is I'm going to undock this sequencer from our little spot that we have, and I'm going to open them up a little bit more, and then I'm going to go to our content browser, and then I'm going to go to the animations. One easy way to go directly to the animations, specifically for Oni, is if you go inside of your sequencer, the purple bar that is the TF80 Oni, left click on that, then you right click, go to hover over properties, go down to where it says animation, and then go to the magnifying glass, and it'll snap you directly to where Oni is standing, or to where the animation for Oni is. And for all of Oni's animation, they're each individual shots. So the TF80 Oni is inside of sequences, TF shots, and then TF80, and then inside of that, animations. And so just so I can show you guys how to add an animation from the content browser into your sequencer, we're going to take the exact same animation, and as you can see here, there's going to be a bunch of red lines that's telling you that's not compatible until you hit the animation segment here. Then that gives you a green line, so we're just going to snap them in there. And so once you do it this way, you have full control in where you're going to be, into what frame you're dropping the sequence off, or the animation off in this instance. And so with that, we now have the exact same animation layered on top of each other, which we don't want. We just want one of them. So we're just going to remove one of them, and we're going to hit save. I'm going to actually dock this sequencer back onto our original dock, just so it's not in the frame. But what we're going to do is we're going to go into our lights, and we want to replicate this to be a little bit more of a shot. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our place actors, we're going to go to our lights, click and drag the point light. Instead of throwing the point light into our level, as we have been doing currently, what we're going to do is we're going to actually have this be spawnable only within our sequencer. So once you click and drag it into your sequencer, you'll see this little lightning bolt icon right next to the light bulb. That is an indication that this asset, this object, is only going to be spawnable inside of Sequencer. So if you ever close out of Sequencer, or if you don't have this specific shot open, this asset and or object will not be visible nor active in any way, shape, or form. It won't exist until you open up this sequencer specifically again. In that instance, each shot individually has its own lighting that gets made, and so this might be different for however you're creating your animations, as sometimes you don't want lighting to be specific per shot, or you do just want global lighting that is going to be what it is across all shots. And so now that we have our point light in here, we're going to click and drag him closer. We're going to place it over here closer to where Oni ends up. And we're just going to adjust it accordingly. Normally, you would want to keyframe the location of wherever you have an asset, and keyframing the transform is absolutely a method of maintaining structure. So you know where everything will always be, and so because of that, we will just keyframe the transform for this light component, and we'll just hit the middle button, which says add new key at current time, which you can also do hit enter as a quick key. But for this instance, it's just going to be, we're going to hit the middle button to be able to toggle, to be able to hit this keyframe. And then we're just going to move the keyframe a little bit back so that way it starts at 0, 0. And so now when we hit play on our sequencer, Oni will come in and he will actually be more lit than he was before. So we don't just have the directional lighting doing all the work. But let's adjust the intensity, shall we? Because it's right now at 8. Let's go to 4, so it's a little bit darker. We'll have that there. Keyframe that as well. And just for the fun of it, we're going to also keyframe the color of the lighting. So we will keyframe this, and then as he gets closer to the light, so about here, we're going to go into our details of our light, of our point light, and we will click the light color. Let's find a good color because he's already kind of bluish. Let's go more towards the red. Let's go towards this red here a little bit. Yeah, no, a little bit lighter on the red. And we'll hit OK. And so in order for this light to now blend from the white to the red that we currently have, in the details panel, there's these diamonds. And these diamonds are effectively a way to keyframe without having to hit enter and without having to hit it within inside of sequencer. So that way, if you already have your scrubber in place to where you're going to be having these new keyframes live. So in this instance, we have our scrubber at frame 15. We'll click on this and add in the new light. So that way, as we hit play now, from frame 0, we'll now have a red light hitting Oni and staying red all throughout the rest of the shot that we've created. And so right now we're just going to hit save so we have everything locked and loaded. And so one thing to really notice that I'm pretty sure everyone has caught on by now is that Oni isn't at our world 0, 0, and his animation is playing effectively where it's currently playing right now. And so the main reason for that is the mocap files, and when we placed it in Maya, all of his animations, and same thing with echoes as well, are especially dependent on, well, they were made for specific shots and for specific locations. So which means we're able to place them beforehand, before placing them in UE, and making sure that they were in the correct locations within regards to their shots. So in this instance, if you were to go to shot 80 inside of our temple, to our master level of the temple, this Oni will will effectively be in the correct spot and the location where he needs to be every single time. So there, much like in video games, there is animations that cycle and that are effectively universal. With our short, that's not the case, as each scene is its own specific and unique scenario, and so in which case each animation is therefore its own specific and unique animation for each of the shots. And so because of that, it's why Oni is all the way already up in the air, pre-jump, and then lands into what is now a ground that is no longer an actual ground, and he's just levitating. So as a means of fixing that, we're just going to raise our ground a little bit up to match his feet. So that way, at least there, he lands on ground instead of just floating in the air. So we're just going to hit play. Bam. And so now that we have a good base for our shot in this instance, what we're going to do is we're going to add in a camera. And so there's many ways to do it. How we're going to go about it is we're going to push the camera button where it says create a new camera. We're going to click on that. So this here that I just selected, that's inside of our sequencer, that is our camera cut. And that is also referencing the current camera that gets spawned in, that then sees for the duration of these frames. So for however long this whole animation or for this whole shot is going to be, this camera cut is going to basically start from our start all the way to our end. We can click and drag at the end of this block and then stretch it beyond where it needs to go, if just in case you ever need to have more frames to be viewed, as that is very important. As if we go beyond this, if you try to render anything out, there will be nothing to see, as there is no camera to view it, and as that is the only way inside of Sequencer to view anything and to render anything out of these guys, is your camera cuts, which is this, and any camera that is referencing these camera cuts that is then allowing you to see these. And then we're going to scroll down, we're going to minimize BP Oni, and we're going to scroll down and we're going to see our cinematic camera actor. After we clicked our button, as it made the camera, and then it made our camera cut, and then it combined the two together, so that way this camera cut is referencing this cinematic actor, so that way we're seeing the exact same thing. And right now, the other thing it did is it locked us to this camera. What I mean by saying by that is the camera icon, both in camera cuts and the cinematic actor, when pressed, snaps your editor viewport to what the camera is seeing. So you now effectively become that camera. So when you select this button, you snap out of that camera. When you push it again, you snap into it. And then for camera cuts, it's effectively the exact same thing. You just snap in and out of it, so that way you can always see what the camera cutscene or your short is seeing. So that way you know how it's looking. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to real quickly go into our focus settings for our cinematic camera actor. We're going to stretch this portion out for you because this needs to be seen. The manual focus distance. We're going to click on the eyedropper and we're going to focus on Oni because he was very blurry before and we need him to be very crisp and sharp in this instance. And so there we go. So now we have him there. And so we're going to snap out of this camera. We're going to pull back and we're going to adjust the camera so we can see Oni. I'm going to rotate the camera. I'm going to start here. And as you can see, if you pop out of the camera actor, select the camera, on the right hand corner of the screen of your editor window will be a representation of what the camera is seeing. So you'll at least always have your editor view and then also what your cinematic actor is seeing as well. And so what we're going to do is we're going to now keyframe the transform. We're going to scrub a little bit forward until he lands, and then we're going to adjust the camera again. There we go, just so we follow it all. We follow Oni from the air down to the bottom, and then once he stands back up into his pose, we're also then gonna grab our camera, adjust the camera as well, and have him center focus and keyframe him there. So that way now when we go to 0, 0, toward the beginning of our frame, we're gonna snap into our camera cut. We're going to see the outline of Oni. We're going to deselect our camera so that way we don't have the annoying... Oh, well, it's not annoying, but we don't have the extra window obstructing our view. And then we're going to hit play. Bam. There we go. What we can touch upon now is rendering. For our rendering, we're going to go over to the drop down, the little arrow that says render movie options. So there's two different ways to actually render this. There's the movie render queue, and then there's the movie scene capture. The movie scene capture is legacy in its default. And for this project, for what we didn't use movie scene capture as it wasn't giving us the high quality that we wanted. So we actually ended up using movie render queue. So we're going to click on the render button, and by default what it tends to do is it doesn't have any settings saved. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to create either your own settings, but with this project we've already set up settings for you to use, settings for you to load in and use, or you can use this to further add in extra settings or to create your own settings as you see fit. The movie render queue is phenomenal in loading in multiple different shots. They're in the upper left-hand corner. If you hit that button, you now have access to effectively all of the shots that you have created, or in this instance, all the shots that we have created. And it is now your choice on whether or not you want to like select them and have them be a part of the queue. So that way you can render out all of these shots individually. Because with the legacy tool, with the legacy rendering, that was very much so rendering per shot, where you have to open the sequencer, click the render button, then click the legacy rendering, and then it renders out. And then you have to rinse and repeat for all of the other shots. So this is a great tool if you have a lot of shots that need the high fidelity settings enabled, for you to load in all of them inside of here and then make sure that they all have the correct settings. And so now, as I was saying before, in terms of the settings that we have provided, you can go to your settings here, and where it says unsaved config, on the right hand side there is a drop down. Click on the drop down and it will give you the final sample config preset. This is the preset that we use for our shots. We have it rendering out JPEGs, PNGs, and all of the settings that give us a great high fidelity render out. You can have these settings be a part of your rendering, and so with this, I'm going to remove this. You would then hit render local, and then this is the process in which you would see once we get into the first couple frames. I'll then just exit out of it. But this is, once you hit render, what you're going to start seeing. And then now I'm just going to exit out of that. But it'll then place its render out where you designated inside of the settings for the config. And then once you have it there, you can open it and see the render that you've kicked out. And so now that we have a good grasp on what we've gone into here, what we're going to do is we're going to go into one of the shots that we've actually created inside of Slay as well. Slay, content Slay, ENV, and we're going to go to Temple, and we're going to double click Temple. And we're not going to save this, as we've already gotten what we've wanted out of this level. So we're not going to hit save, and we're just going to jump on in.
Now that we have our level open again, we can go back to our sequences inside of our content slay sequences, go to TF, open up TF edit. And so now what we're going to go into is talk a little bit about the master sequencer. And so the master sequencer is pretty much a sequencer that then just becomes a holder for every other sequencer that you feel is a good shot. So in this case, as you can kind of see out here outlined, is TF10, TF20, 30, 40, 50, so on and so forth, all the way until we get to the very end. And so that is designed as a means to be able to go into each shot individually without having to go into your sequences and go through all the folder structures that you've created and then work that way. And so what we've done here in Slay is on the left-hand side, there's a thing called shots, which are your sequencers. And so in order to bring that in is you click on track and then shot track as it's currently grayed out. That's because we're currently using it. And so because of that, it's not going to show up. But when you're doing this for the first time, that will generate that. And so one thing that I skipped over was the cinematics add master sequence. What this does is it auto populates. Here, let me click on it for you. Add master sequencer. And so this does quite a bit of the work for you. And depending on your production style, you might use this or you might have to do it manually. And again, it is highly dependent on how you're working and what your preference is. And so the great thing to this is that you got to name your sequence, give it a suffix, and then give it a base pass. So in this case, it was here, slay, sequences, TF. And that's where it'll generate all the shots. And so as well, the great part to the master sequencer is that it'll also create sequences as well for each individual shot. And it gives you a lot of flexibility for start time and how long you want the whole sequencer to be for like 5 seconds, 10 seconds. This is where it's nice to at least have a starting point. And so creating a master sequence when you know you're going to have multiple sequencers will come in very useful. As right here, it'll also help you with your shot directory. It'll give you shot prefixes and it'll increment the numbers, all that stuff. And at the same time, there's even tracking settings that you can add on top of the default settings over here for the cameras. We didn't do too much of this as a lot of the stuff that we created was very manual and very per shot necessity. So if anything, we just use this as the start and base to create the amount of shots we knew we needed. And then from there, manually adjusted them accordingly. And so with that, I'm going to click off of that and we're going to go into one of the shots right now. And the shot that we're going to go into today is going to be shot TF 110. And so we're just going to double click on that one inside of here. So let me just go back to where you can find it. So you're going to scrub all the way to frame 0895. And then if you want, you can hit Control and then you can zoom in or scroll up with the middle mouse wheel or scroll back with the middle mouse wheel. And that can help you zoom in and out of sequencer as a quick little shortcut without having to manually adjust this bar at the very bottom here. So we're going to go to shot TF 0110. We're going to double click that open. And so once we do, we can see that there's already quite a bit of stuff. There's a camera here that we didn't have in our test sequence that we have in here. And there's also these things called lighting effects, and they're also called TF 110 and TF 110 effects, and also characters and other assets that have been turned off to become invisible for this shot. And so just to kind of go over what you're seeing here from top to bottom, top part is I didn't go over this with you in the test sequence, but what this is this is a camera cut. And a camera cut is effectively a way that allows you to see through the camera, and also when you render out, lets the engine know what camera you're seeing through and what camera is going to be rendered out. So in this case, when we click on camera cuts, we can see TF 110 O_01_ camera. And then immediately under this bar is that camera. And so oftentimes what you can do is you can have more than one camera in one shot, but that is just up to you and your preference. As once you do have more than one camera in that shot, you just need to make sure that there is a camera cut here as well that you can then switch between. So you will effectively have two of these guys in here that you can then cut from one camera to the next. So it's not necessarily, you're not overwriting at a certain point. This camera shot, you're creating effectively a new one as as I wanted to show you. So as you can see here, actually here, let me Control Z because I did something that you guys did not see. So we're gonna right click inside of sequencer, inside of here, this area. We're gonna right click and we're gonna move to the right a little bit, and you're gonna see these bookends for the TF camera. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna squeeze them on in. We're gonna grab the right side and just move it on in over here, just to kind of show you what I mean by having a different camera cut. And then we're gonna left click on the TF camera cut here that I just have highlighted, and we're gonna hit Control W. And once we do that, we'll be able to effectively duplicate the camera that we have here. And so now that we have two different, no, it's following. Okay, but now that we have two different camera cuts here, what you're gonna want to do is left click on any one of these and then right click on them, go to properties, and then go to camera bind. Once you do, it'll give you multiple options in terms of anything that is in this sequence. So any of these actors that potentially might be another camera that you might want to switch to, this is where you're going to want to do it. You're going to want to right click on one of these two camera cuts, go to your properties, go to camera binding ID, and look for the other camera that you have in this sequencer. This is also listing out a bunch of other shots, and that's honestly what's going to get a little bit too complicated, so we're not going to even touch that. But what you should be looking for is everything that is located within this sequencer in and of itself. And then that's how you effectively will do a camera cut within a sequencer. But because of how Slay was created, every camera cut was effectively its own shot. And so this camera here was spawned in, as you can see with a little lightning bolt, is spawned in and is only set for this shot in particular, as each one of these little individual shots require different camera finessing and so on and so forth, that it was better off to have these guys be their own individual cameras without having to them traverse shot to shot to shot and having to maintain that. So it was much easier to just have them be their own individual shots. Sometimes it's better when you actually want to see through the lens of that camera and see what it's seeing and seeing how you're navigating around through it. An easy way to do that is by going to your camera here, and then you will notice that all the way towards the right, there's another camera icon. Click on that camera icon and that'll snap you to what that camera is seeing, lens and all. And so another way to see what camera is currently active for your shot is going to your camera cuts and also clicking on the exact same icon. This works really well if you have more than one camera cut, and also helps you debug if at any point when you're rendering all of a sudden you're not seeing anything. This will let you know if there is even a camera associated to it, which will help you out in that term. And so as I'm scrubbing, you can see Oni moving frame by frame, just ever so slowly in rhythm with my scrubber. And so that is because inside of here, we click and dragged our Oni into the sequencer, went into the animations and added this animation into sequencer. And because of that, it gave us this bar with all of his animation keys that we can then scrub through to make sure that he is working accordingly, that all of his movements are what the animators have created and what we had through mocap, all that stuff. And this is a very easy way of seeing, very quickly in your animation, whether or not if there's anything broken, if anything needs to be adjusted or fixed. And also allowing you to time out your shot as well, to where if maybe Oni has a little bit too much animations, you can end the sequencer sooner rather than later, and giving you that ability. And so now that we've looked at Oni, we can scroll down here and take a look at our TF 110 lighting and our TF 110 effects. Now, these are what's known as subsequences, which is effectively a sequencer just inside of a sequencer inside of another sequencer. So just more sequencers inside of each other. But the good part to this is that these subsequences, so for TF10 lighting, are phenomenal because when it comes to working in a project with multiple people, it is great to start splitting up your tracks or your sequences into adjustable modules. So much like how the levels are split up between characters, geo, lighting, terrain, and then terrain for the first shot, you can pretty much do the same thing for your sequences. Where here, because we were going to have, someone working with animation to make sure that that Oni was coming in just right, and we were also going to have someone light to Oni at the same time, we wanted to make sure that both were not stepping on each other's feet. And the best way to have that is to effectively implement subsequences. And so let me show you what I mean by that. And so when you hit the magnifying glass for this shot, it'll snap you directly to where it is. And so this is perfect, as from here you can see that right here are our other sequences. And so we'll we'll go back into our sequencer and we'll double click on TF lighting 10. And on the left-hand side, you can automatically see that there's already these lights being adjusted. There's some modifications being done to Oni's for his eyes, all that stuff. And a lot more assets being turned invisible as their visibility is being turned off. So that way more light can stream into this shot. And so the lighters can have all this, because as you can see, there was a temple there. But for the lighting in this shot, the lighters wanted to have more light come in. And so in order to do that, without trying to recreate the sun in the background, they simply turned off the entire temple that was once standing there to give you this shot here. And they were able to do that in concurrent with the animation going and also with any effects going. Now for this shot, there is no effects, but there are effects on other shots. And we wanted to make sure that there was at least subsequences for both of those to make sure that multiple people were able to work without being hindered, as when you work inside of this in a production scales with a form of source control, this can get very bottlenecked really, really quickly. And with that, what we're going to do here is we're going to go back to Oni and actually make a modification to him for this shot, as we kind of want to, let's just say, adjust his mask over here. If you click on Oni and then you go to his details and then you scroll up to see his mask, that material instance, let's make a modification to that. We'll go to Oni, click on track, click on his skeletal component, click on track, and now remember what element the mask was. It was element 3. Click on element 3. Perfect. So let me explain the steps we just took. What we needed to do is in order to make the adjustments to Oni's mask, we need to make sure we can grab element 3, which is holding a reference to that material instance. In order to do that, we need to go in a particular set of steps. We need to first get to Oni as the overall component. We need to then go into his skeletal mesh, skeletal mesh component, which holds all of the information for all of the slots, which are all these elements that he has, which is perfect. And once we're there, we need to then grab the very specific material that we want to modify. In which case, this is element 3. As you saw, there's multiple other elements, and there's multiple other selections that you can do as well. But we'll be focusing on element 3. And then from there, we'll click on parameters. So here's the thing. This is dependent on how your materials have been set up. In this production flow that we had, we didn't need too much for him, as a lot of it was being handled in textures. We just wanted to make sure that there was small modifications here and there that we could do. But this might be different in your project and in your pipeline. And so with that, you have the ability here to enable inside of your materials parameters that become accessible either via blueprints and also via sequencer, as long as they are made public, which is just turning it into a parameter and not having it be a constant, which that is going to be something that is covered in the materials lesson, which will not be covered here. But you'll take that information from what you have from the materials, and then anything that you have be a parameter can be adjusted here. And so again, for Oni, for this particular shot, we want to get the most bang for our buck. And so we're going to have our albedo brightness be modifiable. And so when we make the keyframe for it, it'll be what the current keyframe will be where it currently sits. And so again, we don't want to make the adjustment in the actual material itself, as that will then propagate to all the other shots. And we don't want that. We just want it for this specific shot. So what we're going to do is we're going to do this inside of sequencer. We're just going to crank this up to 100. Yeah, that looks fine. Yep. There we go. Approved. Done. And so obviously we don't want it that high, but let's just say 2.5. And then just for this shot, you can modify his mask accordingly to be slightly brighter, to be less bright, whatever you feel needs a certain adjustment to him to make your own Oni mask, which I'm really digging the 100. That's just a personal fan favorite. I just like how that looks. Yeah, that's definitely approved in my book. But you can effectively do this for all the other material instances as long as they have parameters available to be adjusted. And this is one good way to just nudge a value to what you feel would be perfect for this scene, and what you feel like might need to be just slightly tweaked to give it that little extra kick. And we're just going to keep that. I'm going to keep it at 5. And so with that, that is a good stopping point for where we are in sequencer, as that should give you a good overview and nice little tips here and there to hopefully get you running and get you started on adding in or modifying any sequencers that you currently have up and running, or maybe ones that you want to make. And yeah, just have fun with it. So now that we're at the end of the sequencer class, I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you for joining me here today and letting me walk you through what we've learned in Slay and just introduced a nice little primer that can hopefully get the wheels turning and get some ideas flowing, or at least that inspired you to dig deeper and find more. Thank you once again. Thank you very much. Bye.